Hello, my name is Akan Wansa with the last NPM 223. And in this opportunity, I will bring a material about property, plant, and equipment. First, what is property, plant, and equipment, or we shorten it to PPA? PPA is defined as tangible assets that are held for use in production or supply of goods and services, or for rentals to others, or for administrative purpose. They are expected to be used during more than one period, aka durable asset. PPA therefore includes land, building structures like offices, factories, or warehouses, and also includes equipment like machinery, furniture, and tools. The major characteristic of property, plant, and equipment are: 1. They are acquired for use in operation and not for resale. PPE that held for possible price appreciation, or the companies want to resell it, are classified as investment. And second, they are long-term in nature and usually depreciated. The exception is land, however, which is depreciated only if material decrease in value occurs or happen. The example is like a loss in fertility of agricultural land. And the third one is they possess a physical substance. This characteristic can differentiate them from intangible assets such as patents or copyrights. The second slide, we will talk about acquisition of PPE. So, most companies use historical cost as the basis to value PPE. Historical cost measures the cash or cash equivalent price of obtaining the asset and bringing it to the location and condition necessary for its intended use. Companies recognize PPE when the cost of the asset can be measured reliably and it is probable that the company will obtain future economic benefits. Example is like coffee shop buying coffee makers machine. So these costs are reported as assets because they can reliably measured and benefit future periods from coffee makers machine. If the coffee shop make repairs or annual maintenance, it is recorded as expense because the primary period benefited is only the current period that the maintenance is occurred. In general, companies report purchase price and cost attributable to bringing the asset to the location and condition necessary for it to be used in a manner intended by the company as part of PPA. And companies value PPA in subsequent periods using either the cost method or fair value, or another term is revaluation method. Companies can apply the cost of or fair value method to all the items of PPA or to a single class or classes of PPA. For example, a company may value land. Land is one class of asset after acquisition using the revaluation accounting method or fair value method. But at the same time, the companies value buildings and equipment. This is other classes of asset than land. They value it at cost. But most companies use the cost method. It is less expensive to use because the cost of an appraiser is not needed. And in addition, the revaluation or fair value method generally leads to higher asset values, which means that companies report higher depreciation expense and lower net income. The third slide is about self-constructed asset. So occasionally, companies construct their own asset. So they did not buy already ready asset, and then so without a purchase price or contract price, the company must allocate costs and expenses themselves. The cost of materials and direct labor pose no problem. It is easy uh, to allocate them. But the assignment of indirect costs or usually cut overhead can create special problems. Companies can handle overhead in one of two ways. One is they can assign no fixed overhead to the cost of the constructed asset, or they can assign a portion of all overhead to the construction process. This is called a full costing approach. Under this approach, a company assigns a portion of all overhead to the construction process, as it would to normal production. Why? Because advocates say that failure to allocate overhead costs can understate the initial cost of the asset and result in an inaccurate future allocation. Companies should assign to the asset a pro rata portion of the fixed overhead to determine its cost. Companies use this treatment extensively because many believe that it results in a better matching of costs with revenues. Abnormal amount of waste material, labor, or other resources should not be added to the cost of the asset.
Hello everyone, my name is Pio Raditya Sugiono with the last NPM 175, and for the next learning objective, we are going to talk about borrowing costs during construction. There are three possible approaches to calculate interest paid in construction financing. The first one, we have capitalized no interest during construction, and then we have capitalized actual costs incurred during construction, or capitalized only some costs. And then the third one, we have capitalized all costs of funds. Okay, so for capitalization, IFRS requires that only actual interest with modifications can be capitalized. This is the second one that we have talked before. And then the process is consistent with historical cost. And the third one, capitalization, consider qualifying assets, capitalization period, and also amount to capitalize. Okay, now we will dive deeper into the three things that capitalization consider. The first one is the qualifying assets. They are assets that require a substantial period of time to get them ready for their intended use or sale. Two of those assets are assets under construction for a company's own use, such as building, plants, and large machinery, and also assets intended for sale or lease that require a substantial period of time to produce, such as ships and real estate development. Okay, so for the second one, we have capitalization period, which is the period of time during which a company capitalizes borrowing cost. It starts when expenditures for the asset are being incurred, activities that are necessary to get the asset ready for its intended use or sale are in progress, and the last one, borrowing cost is being incurred. Capitalization continues as long as these three conditions are present, and it ends when the asset is substantially complete and ready for its intended use. Okay, so for the third or last one of the consideration of capitalization, which is amount to capitalize, it is the amount of borrowing cost to be capitalized that varies depending on whether there is specific debt that has been incurred to fund the project or whether the project is being funded from general debt of the company. Okay, next we will calculate the weighted average accumulated expenditures. To find that, here we already have the table that we will use. So for the expenditures of January 1, the amount is $210,000, and then for the March is $300,000, and for May 1 is $540,000, and for December 31 is $450,000. With the totals is $1,500,000. So next we will determine the capitalization period. For January 1, because it is still in the January, we will just input the number 12 per 12. And then for March, because March is 10 months away from December, we will put 10 per 12 there. And then for May, because May is 8 months away, we will write 8 per 12. And then for December 31, because it is already in December itself, we will write 0 per 12. And that will be our information to count the average carrying amount. For January 1, we can get $210,000 by multiplying the amount of expenditures and capitalization period. And for the March 1, the average carrying amount is $250,000. We can get by multiplying $300,000 with 10 per 12. And then for the May one, we can get $360,000 by multiplying $540,000 with 8 per 12. And for December 31, we can get the average carrying amount is 0 because the capitalization period is 0 per 12. And we will total or the average carrying amount to get the weighted average accumulated expenditures, which we can get $820,000. Okay, next we will count the capitalization rate. Here we will use 0 per 10, which we can get by the information here on number 1, which is 10%, and we will multiply it by 1 million divided by 2,500,000 that we can get by the information number 1, which is $1 million, and 2,500,000 is we can get by adding 1 million and 1,500,000, and we will plus it by 0.12, which we get from number 2, 12%, and multiply it with the same amount as before, and we will add those two amounts to get 11.2% as the capitalization rate. By combining these two amounts, the amount of borrowing cost available for capitalization is now computed, which we can get by multiplying the weighted average accumulated expenditures, which is $820,000, and multiply it by 12.8 and multiply it by 0.112, and we can get 91,000, and we can get 91,840 as the borrowing cost to be capitalized.
The next material is about cash discount. So when a company purchases a planned assets subject to cash discount or prompt payment, so how we should report it? So there are two point of view exist in this question. One approach consider the discount whenever taken or not as a reduction in the cost of the asset. The rationale for this approach is that the real cost of the asset is the cash or cash equivalent price of the asset. In addition, some argue that the term of cash discount are so attractive that failure to take them indicate management error or inefficiency. With respect to the second approach, its proponents argue that failure to take the discount should not always be considered a loss. The term may be unfavorable, or it might not be prudent for the company to take the discount. At present, companies use both method, though most prefer to the former method. Next material is about deferred payment contracts. Company frequently purchase planned asset on long-term credit contracts. using notes, mortgage, bond, or equipment obligation. So to properly reflect costs, company account for asset purchase on long-term credit contracts at the present value of the considered exchange between the contracting parties at the date of the transaction. So when no interest rate is paid, of if the specific rate is unreasonable, the company imputes an appropriate interest rate. The objective is to approximate the interest rate that the buyer and seller would negotiate at arm's length in a similar borrowing transaction. In imputing an interest rate, companies consider such factors as the borrower credit rating, the amount and maturity date of the note, and prevail interest rate. So the company use the cash exchange price of the asset acquired, if determinable, as the basic basis for recording the asset and measuring the interest element. So to illustrate the deferred payment contract, we have illustration with Shutter AG. So the company purchased a specially built robot spray painter for its production line. The company issue a €100 for 5 years, zero interest bearing, to Wrigley Robotics for the new equipment. The prevailing market rate of interest for obligation of this network is 10%. Shutter is to pay off the note in five €2,000 installment made at the end of each year. Shutter cannot readily determine the fair value of this specially built robot. Therefore, Shutter approximate the robot value by establishing the fair value, present value, of the notes. Entries for the date of purchase and dates of payment plus compulating of the present value of the notes are as follow. So the first thing we are going to search is the present value. We use we calculate the present value and we got 75,816. And for the reporting, we can get equipment in debit 70,816, and in credit it's not payable. For the end of the first years, we calculate the interest expense with uh, multiplying 75,816 multiplied by 0.1 or 10%. And for notes, and to make the installment of €2,000, we debit also the notes payable of for 12,480, and the credit side is cash. For the second year, we just need to uh, uh, we just need to save to do the 75,816 minus with 2,480, because we already pay the notes payable, and multiply it with 10%, and we gonna get the interest expense, notes payable, and cash. So next material is about lump sum purchase. A common challenge in valuing fixed asset arises when a company purchases a group of assets at a single lump sum price. When this occurs, the company allocates the total cost among the various assets on the basis of the relative fair value. The assumption is that cost will vary in direct proportion to fair value. This is the same principle that company apply to allocate of a lump sum cost among different inventory items. So to determine the fair value, companies should use valuation techniques that are appropriate in the circumstance. In some case, a single valuation technique will be appropriate. In another case, multiple valuation approaches might have to be used. So to illustrate, we have on the picture here, inventory, land, and building. We have the book value with inventory with 30,000, land 20,000, and building 35,000. And the total is 85,000. And on the fair value side, we have inventory 25,000, land 25,000, and building 50,000. And the total is 100. So to allocate in this example, we allocate 80,000 purchase price on the basis of the relative fair value. This is a assumption here. So we gonna get the inventory. We use the fair value. So we gonna do is 25,000 divided by 100,000 multiplied by 80,000 and we got 20,000. It's same for the land 25,000 divided by 100 and land we are going and multiplied by 80,000 we got 20,000 and building 50,000 divided by 100 multiplied by 80,000 and we got 40,000. So the next material is about issuance of share. When company acquire property by using securities such as ordinary share, the par or state value of such share fails to properly measure the property cost. If trading of the share is active, the market price of the share issue is a fair indication of the cost of the property acquired. The shares are a good measure for the current cash equivalent price. So, for example, we have Upgrade Living Co. Decide to purchase some adjacent land for expansion of its carpeting and cabinet operation. In lieu of paying cash for the land, the company issued to the land company 5,000 ordinary share with par value of $10 that the market that have a market price of $12 per share. So Upgrade Living Co records the following entry with land in debit side 5,000 multiplied by $12 we got $60,000 and the share capital or the original price with 5,000 multiplied by $10 we get $50,000 and share premium or the interest not interest is the gain from the share 5,000 we multiply it with 2 so we gonna get $10,000. So if company cannot determine the fair value of the ordinary share exchange based on the market, it may estimate the fair value of the property. It then use the value of the property as the basis for recording the asset and issuance of the ordinary share. For the next material is about exchange of non-monetary assets. So the proper accounting for exchange of the non-monetary assets such as property, plant, and equipment is controversial. Some argue that the company should account for this type of exchange based on the fair value of the asset given up or the fair value of the asset received, with a gain or loss recognized. Others believe that they should account for exchange based on the recording amount or book value of the asset given up with no gain or loss recognition. Still, others favor an approach that recognizes losses in all cases but defer gain in special situations. Ordinarily, companies account for the exchange of the non-monetary assets on the basis of the fair value of the asset given up or the fair value of the asset received, whichever is clearly more evidence. Thus, the company should recognize immediately any gains or loss on the exchange. The reasonable for immediate recognition is that most transactions have commercial substance, and therefore gain and losses should be recognized. So, as indicated above, fair value is the basis for measuring an asset acquired in a non-monetary exchange if the transaction has commercial substance. An exchange has commercial substance if the future cash flow changes as a result of the transaction. That is, if the two parties' economic position change, the transaction has commercial substance. So, when a company exchanges non-monetary assets and a loss result, the company recognizes the loss if the exchange has commercial substance. The rational company should not value assets at more than their cash equivalent price. If the loss were deferred, asset would be overstated. So in this slide, we have exchange of non-monetary assets for loss situation with commercial substance. So for example, information processing as a trades, it issued machine for a new model at Jarrod Business Solution NV. The exchange has commercial substance. The used machine has a book value of 8,000, original cost 12,000 euro, less 4,000 accumulated depreciation, and a fair value of 6,000. The new model is for 16,000 euro. So Jared gives information process a trade-in allowance of 9,000 for the used machine. Information process. So the information process thing computes the cost of the new asset. So first, we are going to compute the cost of the new machine. And for this, we list the new machine price, 60,000 euro, and subtract it with the trade-in allowance for the used machine, 9,000 euro. And we get cash payment due, 7,000 euro, and the fair value of the machine. Fair value of used machine is 6,000 euro, and we gonna get cash cost of the new machine is 13,000 euro. The next is we gonna calculate our loss. So we uh, fair value of used machine 6,000 euro. We gonna subtract it with the book value of used machine with 8,000 euro, and we gonna loss on disposal of used machine 2,000 euro. And for the reporting, on the debit side, we have equipment, accumulated depreciation of equipment, loss on disposal of equipment. So on the credit side, we have equipment $12,000, 12,000 euro, and cash 7,000. In this slide, we have exchange of non-monetary asset with a gain situation. For example, to illustrate, Interstate Transportation Company exchange a number of used truck plus cash for a semi-truck. The used truck have a combined book value of 42,000. Original cost 64,000 and less 22,000 accumulated depreciation. Interested purchasing agent experience in the second-hand market indicates that the used truck have a fair value of 49,000. In addition of the truck, interested must pay $11,000 cash for the semi-truck. Interstate complete the cost of the semi-truck is so like the previously we gonna calculate the cost of the semi-truck. So the fair value of the semi-truck is $49,000, and we gonna pay 11,000 in cash. So the total cost of the semi-truck is 60,000. The next thing we gonna do is we calculate we get a gain or a loss. So first we gonna take the fair value of used truck and the cost of our truck originally 64,000 and the accumulated depreciation, and we gonna get the book value of used truck 42,000. So we gonna subtract it with the fair value, and we gonna get a gain on disposal of used truck 7,000. To report it, we gonna debit side we have trucks 60,000 and the depreciation accumulated depreciation 22,000, and on credit side we credit our truck because we exchange it 64,000. We gain on the disposal so 7,000, and the cash previously 11,000. In this slide we have exchange of non-monetary assets but without the commercial substance. So we assume that the interstate transportation from the previous slide exchange lack commercial substance. That is, the economic position of interstate did not change significantly as a result of this exchange. In this case, interstate different the gain of 7,000 and reduce the basis of the semi-truck. So for uh, the first thing we are gonna do is uh, pick our calculation. The first one is for fair value of semi-truck. We subtract it with the gain differ 7,000 and basis of the semi-truck is 53,000. Or we can use the book value of used truck and plus it with cash we paid 11,000. So we gonna get 53,000. It's still the same. So for the recording, we have the same. So on the truck is 53,000 because we get the basis, and our accumulated depreciation for the truck is 22,000 from the previous question, and the truck use 64,000 is the same from the previous question, and our cash paid 11,000. So if the exchange lack commercial substance, the company recognize the gain reflected in the basis of the semi-truck when it's later sell the semi-truck, not at the time for the exchange. So to summarize the non exchange of non-monetary assets. So we compute the total gain or loss on the transaction. This amount is equal to the difference between the fair value of the asset given up and the book value of asset given up. So A, if the exchange has commercial substance, recognize the entire gain or loss. But if the exchange lack of commercial substance, no gain or loss is recognized. So company disclose in their financial statement non-monetary exchange during a period. Such disclosure indicate the nature of transaction, the method of accounting for the asset exchange, and gain or loss recognized on the exchange. The next material is about government grants. So many companies receive government grants. Government grants are assistance received from a government in the form of transfer of resources to a company in return for past or future compliance with certain conditions relating to the operation activity of the company. So in other words, a government grant is often some type of asset such as cash, security, property, plant or equipment, or use of facility provided as a subsidy to a company. A government grant also occurs when debt is forgiven or borrowings are provided to the company at a below market interest rate. The major accounting issue with government grant are to determine the proper method of accounting for this transfer on the company books and how they should be presented in the financial statement. So when company acquire an assets such as property, plant or equipment through a government grant, a strict cost concept dictates that the valuation of the asset should be zero. However, a departure from the historical cost principle seems justified because the only cost it incurred, legal fee and other relatively minor expenditure, are not a reasonable basis of accounting for the asset acquired. To record nothing is to ignore the economic realities of an decrease in wealth and asset. Therefore, most companies use the fair value of the asset to establish its book value. So, what if it's proper accounting for the credit related to the government grant when the fair value of the asset is issued? So there are two approach suggested. The first one is the capital or equity approach and the income approach. So the supporter of the equity approach believe the credit should directly to equity because often no repayment of the grant is expected. In addition, these grants are an incentive by the government. They are not earned as part of normal operation and should not offset expense of the operation on the income statement. On the other supporter of the income approach disagree. They believe that the credit should be reported as revenue in the income statement. Government grants should not go directly to equity because the government is not a shareholder. In addition, most government grants have conditions attached to them, which likely affect future expense. They should therefore be reported as grant revenue or different grant revenue and match with the associated expense that will occur in the future as a result of the grant. But IFRS require the income approach. The general rule is that grants should be recognized in income on a systematic basis that matches them with the related costs that they are intended to compensate. This is accomplished in one of two ways for the assets such as property, plant, or equipment. The first one is recording the grant as different grant revenue, which is recognized as income on a systematic basis over the useful life of the asset. Or second one, deducting the grant for the carrying amount of the asset received from the grant, in which case the grant is recognized in income as a reduction of depreciation expense.
My name is Aulia Indah Aprilita with the last three digit NPM 183, and we're gonna moving to talk about cost subsequent to acquisition. After a company install plant assets, it may incur additional costs such as repairs and improvements. The main issue is how to allocate these costs to the correct accounting periods. Companies usually use the same criteria as initial asset recognition, such as costs are capitalized if they can be measured reliably and are expected to provide future economic benefits. Otherwise, they are expense. Evidence of future economic benefit would include increases in 1. Useful life, 2. Quantity of product produced, and 3. Quality of product produced. The underlying concept is expensing long-lived wastebasket in an application of the materiality concept. Generally, companies incur four types of major expenditures relative to the existing assets. The first one is additions. Additions to the plant assets are generally capitalized because they create new assets and increase the service potential of a facility, such as adding a new wing or installing an air conditioning system. A key issue arises when part of the existing structure must be removed to make room for the addition, such as tearing down an old wall. The accounting treatment depends on the company's original intent. If the addition was planned in advance, the removal cost is included as part of the addition and capitalized. But if it's not, the cost is treated as a loss in the current period due to poor planning. Conceptually, the company should remove the carrying amount of the old asset and recognize a loss, then add the cost of the new structure to the asset. However, because it is often difficult to determine the old asset's carrying amount, companies typically assume it is zero and simply capitalize the cost of the new addition. The second one is improvements and replacements. Improvements and replacement involve substituting one asset for another. An improvement or the betterment replaces an asset with a better one, while a replacement uses a similar asset. These expenditures often part of effort to modernize or rehabilitate assets. The main challenge is distinguishing them from normal repairs. If the expenditure increases the asset's future service potential, it should be capitalized. In this case, the old assets costs are related depreciation are removed. Any loss is recognized and the cost of the new asset is recorded. Here is the one of example of the improvement and replacement. The old pipes have a book value of 5,000, which comes from their original cost of 150,000 minus accumulated depreciation of 135,000, and they also have a residual value of 1,000. The new plastic tapping system costs 125,000, and after exchanging the old pipes, the new company pays 124,000 in cash to acquire the new system. The journal entry is written as equipment or plumbing system 125,000 in debit, accumulated depreciation equipment 135,000 in debit, loss on disposal of equipment 14,000 in debit, and then equipment, plumbing system 150,000 in credit, and then cash 125 minus by 1000 is 125,000 in credit. Still talking about improvements and replacement, one issue in asset substitution is determining the cost and accumulated depreciation of the old asset. Fortunately, IFRS requires that each significant component of an asset be identified and depreciated separately with its own depreciation base. This approach is known as component depreciation accounting. For example, Hanoi purchased a tractor for 50,000. The tractor consists of several individual components. Each of the components will have its own useful life, and all components have zero residual value. There is shown that the tires it has cost 6,000, the useful life is 2 years, and the depreciation per year will be 3,000. Then the transmission it has cost 10,000 with useful life 5 years, and the depreciation per year will be 2,000. And then the truck itself is 35,000 with useful life 10 years, and depreciation per year will be 3,040. Companies should keep accounting records based on the components of the asset. If the company doesn't have this information, estimation methods generally can provide a reasonable answer. The third one of major types of expenditure is rearrangement and reorganization. As indicated earlier, a company may incur rearrangement or reorganization costs for some of its assets. The question is whether the costs incurred in this rearrangement or reorganization are capitalized or expensed. IFRS indicates that the recognition of cost cases once the asset in the location and condition necessary to be in operating as management intended. As the result, the cost of reorganizing or rearranging existing PPE are not capitalized but are expensed as incurred. And the fourth or the last types of expenditures are repairs. There are two types of repairs. The first one is ordinary repairs. It is made to maintain plant assets in normal operating condition and are expensed in the period incurred because they primarily benefit the current period. This include routine maintenance activities such as replacing minor parts, lubricating and adjusting equipment, repainting and cleaning. Companies treat this as ordinary operating expenses. It can sometimes be difficult to distinguish repairs from improvements or replacements, but the key consideration is whether the expenditure benefits more than one period. If a repair, such as a major overhaul, provides benefits over several periods, it should generally be treated as an improvement or replacement rather than an ordinary repair. And the second type of repairs are major repairs. It involves significant costs that benefit multiple periods, such as overhauls for airplanes or ships. These costs are not treated as ordinary expenses, but are accounted for as separate components for the asset using component depreciation. For example, a ship may require a major overhaul every few years, and the estimated overhaul cost is recorded as part of the asset and depreciated over the period until the next overhaul. When the overhaul occurs, the old components cost and accumulated depreciation are removed and replaced with the new overhaul cost. What do the number mean? Here's the real case of the cost subsequent to acquisition. The WorldCom case illustrates the importance of correctly distinguish between capital expenditures and operating expense, which is a key concept in accounting for plant assets. Instead of recording certain costs as operating expense, WorldCom improperly capitalized them, making expenses appear lower and profits higher in the short term. This thing violates the same principle applied in topics such as ordinary repairs, improvements, replacement, and rearrangement costs, where companies must determine whether an expenditure provides future economic benefits. If it does, the cost is capitalized, but if it's not, it should be expensed. By ignoring this rule, WorldCom overstated its financial performance, demonstrating how improper cost classification can mislead financial statements and lead to serious consequences. The difference that stated from this case is the expense about capital loss and operating expense. The proper accounting principle, it should be one, the 3.1 billion line cost expense would be booked as an operating expense, but due to WorldCom's accounting, it is accounted that the 3.1 billion in line cost is including telecom access and transport charges as capital expenditures. The second one is amortization and cost of business. Due to proper accounting principles, the entire 3.1 billion would have been counted as a cost of business for that quarter, but WorldCom's accounting planned to amortize 3.1 billion over a period of time, possibly as much as 10 years. And then the third one, the higher net income and lower net income. Due to proper accounting principles, net income for the current year would have been a loss amount to be determined, but WorldCom's accounting stated it and reported the net income of 1.38 billion for the current year. The summary of costs subsequent to acquisition. The type of expenditures. First one is additions. The normal accounting treatment to additions is capitalized cost of addition to asset account. And then the second one is improvements and replacements. The normal accounting treatment to this type of expenditure is to remove cost and accumulated depreciation on old asset, then recognizing any gain or loss, capitalized cost of improvement or replacement. And then the third one of type of expenditure is rearrangement and reorganization. The normal accounting treatment for this expenditure is expense cost of rearrangement and reorganization cost as expense. And then for the fourth one is repairs. The normal accounting treatment for the ordinary repair is expense cost of repairs when incurred. And for the major repair, remove cost and accumulated depreciation of old asset, recognizing any gain or loss, and capitalized cost of major.
We can talk about the disposition of property, plant, and equipment. A company have a fixed asset like maybe machine or building. When a fixed asset sold or disposed, the steps are we record the depreciation up to this disposal date, like the final disposition must be recognized, and then we remove the fixed asset from the books. We remove the cost or acquisition price and the accumulated depreciation, and then we compare the book value with the cash received. Book value it's mean cost minus by accumulated depreciation, and when the cash is greater than the book value it means gain, and when the cash lower than the book value it means loss. And we report the gain or loss in income statement as part of normal operation if it major of business component, and we report it separately as a discontinued operation. So we can talk about the sale of plant asset. This is a simple example, simple case. As we know in the question, the machine costing it's 18,000 for 9 years, and for 3 years is 1,200. And then if it sells the machine in the middle of the 10th year for 7,000, and then it used 9.5 years because sold in middle of the 10 years. We journalize the 1200 multiplied by 0.5. Why? Because we want to record end the end depreciation, the final depreciation, because it's sells in the middle of the 10 years, so it's just a half a year. And then the calculation is 600. For the journal, it's in debit depreciation expense and in credit accumulated depreciation. And we calculate and we calculate the accumulated depreciation for 9 years. It's 1200 multiplied by 9. It's become 10,800, and then we place it with 600, so we have 11,400. And then we're looking for the book value. As I told you, the book value is cost minus by accumulated depreciation. So the cost is 18,000. It's already provided in the questions, and we minus it with 11,400, and we have 6,600. Then we compare it the selling price, because the cash is 7,000 in questions, and for the book value it's 6,600. And then because the cash is greater, so it's gain 400. And then we try the journal. The debit is cash 7,000, and accumulated depreciation 11,400. And for the credit, it's machinery in 18,000, and credit is gain on disposal 400 from the gain. Next, involuntary conversion is a fixed asset. It's lost or damaged not by choice. Example, it's fire, flood, theft, or natural disaster. In accounting process, they have two steps. First, we record the loss first. Like when asset is destroyed, we calculate the book value. Since the asset gone, so no value left. So loss it's equal with book value of the asset. And then we record the recovery. If later company receive money from the government or from the insurance, we record it as a gain or revenue. But do not record this at the beginning because the amount is uncertain and not guaranteed yet. Why two step? Because in IFRS do not allow recognizing uncertain gains or continuing assets. So for the example, we have a simple from the camel transport. So the cost of the buildings is 6 million, and the accumulated depreciation is 2.5 million, and the book value it's from the cost minus by accumulated depreciation we have 3.5 million, and the insurance settlement is 5 million. The journal entry we can write it as loss from tornado in debit 3.5 million, and the accumulated depreciation buildings 2.5 million also in debit, and for the credit it's building 6 million. And the second steps, because we have received insurance in March 18, 2023, because company received cash, so we record it as cash in debit 5 million, and the credit is gain from insurance settlement also 5 million. Why the gain is 5 million, not the difference? Because the loss was already recorded in 2022, so in 2023 this is treated as separate event.